rescues, strengthens, and provides. Welcome to Stories of Faith. Today, we'll meet people from different walks of life who have at one point in their lives struggled with substance abuse. First, we'll meet April Kapatsingan, a young woman from New Jersey whose lifestyle was spinning her out of control. But see what finally changed her course. This is her story.
April Kapatsingan is a graphic artist from Jersey City, New Jersey. She's a young woman with much ambition and purpose. This is April today, but this was April just a few years ago. Here's a story of hope and spiritual discovery. As a young girl, April lived in different parts of the world. Her family eventually settled in the Philippines. But it was after her parents' divorce when her life took a drastic turn.
Basically, my dad left, and a few years later, my mom had to leave because she couldn't afford to raise us with her income in the Philippines, so she had to move to New York and make a living here. And so it was just me, my brother, and my sister in an apartment, so it was basically just hanging out with them.
With very little supervision growing up, April began to live a very carefree life.
Just hanging out with the wrong crowd, just start drinking at a young age or whatever. And then going to art school. It's just crazy, people experiment.
April eventually moved to the States, but she continued her reckless lifestyle.
Even at work, I'd start doing drugs at work. I'd go to the bathroom and just come out and then just sit there all spaced out and just basically lost. I would just be out, and then the next morning I wake up, I don't even know where I am. And it was getting to a point where it wasn't good anymore. Like I didn't even know who I was. My best friend, Brian Pangilinan, sit me down and made me choose.
Being the artist that she was, she loved music and often jammed with some friends. But what started out as a jamming session became the way for her to find God.
I was hanging out at Brian's house a lot, and we would practice, our band would practice there. And at the same time, Bible studies were held at his house, so we would have to stop playing music for the Bible study to go on. I mean, I went to Catholic school all my life, but attending Bible study, my first day in Bible study, I learned a lot more than I did 12 years in Catholic school. And Bible studies, they really did answer my question, and it wasn't just a question that he got out of his head. He would Brother Noel actually picked up a Bible and flipped through pages and go, read me a verse that explained my question. Through the Bible, my life just started making sense. Everything was in place.
Being introduced to the Iglesia ni Cristo essentially saved her life.
I changed my life by just stopped doing whatever I was doing. I just went cold turkey and I just kind of didn't have the need for that anymore, the old life.
Finding God has given April a sense of security and comfort that she's never had before.
Before, whenever I had anxiety or stress and just problems, I would just turn to the wrong kind of friends. So I would drink and do all these drugs and party all night. Now, whenever I do have stress, I don't run away from it. I just pray. When I don't know what to do, I pray, and then after I pray, I just there's something that tells me that this is what you should do. I just feel God tell me the right thing to do. I don't feel lost anymore because I know that God's always there. I don't lose hope anymore. Somebody's always there for me.
April's transformation is a reminder to us that no matter how hopeless life appears, there is always someone who will lead us through. And like April, Robert Beauchamp was in desperate need of a wake-up call. See how a chance meeting led Robert to the peace he desired most. This is his story.
There's a lot of things that I don't have. God knows my needs. You know, before when I was in the other churches, nothing ever happened. Nothing. I pray and I pray and I pray and nothing ever happens. So I figured I must have been doing something wrong. And now that I came to the Church of Christ, my God, man, I must be doing something right. I must be in the right place because everything is happening good for me and my daughter. And I just got to praise God. Nobody else did this for me. God did this for me. He led me to his church. And I thank Jesus. You know, Jesus died to give guys like me a chance. You know, you've been down so much already. There's no place else to go but up. But you never get there until you find God. I was doing some missionary work for this church that I used to go to. You know, I had questionnaires. I'd go around the beach and the parks, and I'd ask them, you know, if they wouldn't mind answering some questions. And as I was passing this park, I turned around and looked, and I saw two ladies over there sitting down with their dogs. And I passed them already. And something in my mind kept telling me, turn around, turn around. And you know, I went down the road about a quarter mile, then I turned around. So I stopped and I asked them, would you fill out my questionnaires? And they said, yeah, sure. And then we started talking about Jesus and God.
And I told them that our church have a Bible exposition this Saturday, so I would like you to come to our church and attend that. And that was the beginning.
And all the answers that shocked me was coming straight out of the Bible. I'd never seen this before. And they had my full attention. But ever since that day, I never turned in those questionnaires. And then I started coming to the Church of Christ. And it just changed my whole life. All my life, all I did was do drugs. Everything was drugs. I did it all. I used to shoot up and snort, smoke. I drink a lot of whiskey. I'd start from Holly Eve, buy me a big bottle of Jack Daniels, smoke some crystal meth, and end up way on the other side of the island and don't remember how I got there. You know, before my life, I didn't care if I died. I didn't care about myself. I really didn't. I get in a fight. I don't care if they kill me or I kill them. I had a lot of money. I had a lot of cars. I had a lot of women. I had a lot of gold. But I never had peace. You know, I was always paranoid and nothing made me happy. I was a Catholic, I was a Jehovah's Witness, I was a Mormon, I went to the Buddhist church. I tried everything, and I never had nothing in here, nothing to make me happy. But when I went to the Church of Christ, it just changed my life and my daughter's life. Got to the Church of Christ, And I went to their church, the big assembly that they had, and from that day on, I never went back to my church. And right now where I'm at, I'm very happy. And I finally found that thing I was looking for inside. Yeah, you know, money didn't do it. The women, the cars, the clothes, none of that did it. I had so much gold because I had the drugs. And it wasn't worth it. I was looking for something, happiness. You know, I'm a pretty poor man now, but man, I'm rich in God. You know, I got something to look forward to in my life.
As you just witnessed, finding peace was all that Robert ever really needed. We'll now meet Kirsten Shepard, who was a lost young mother. See what finally gave her hope for a better future.
Kirsten Shepard, a member of the Church of Christ in Livermore, California, has a lot of things to be happy about: her faith and her son.
My son's name is Andrew. He's 13 years old now. I guess you could say when he was born, he was a miracle baby. I didn't know if he was going to live or die, and he did. He survived. Sweet, he was sweet, a beautiful baby. And I think I just took it for granted right away. And I didn't take care of him as good as I should have. Before I became a member of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, I was also drinking alcohol, doing drugs. I spent a lot of time with my friends. I had parties every night in my house because that's what I thought, you know, living on your own brought me, which it didn't bring me anything. It brought me mostly just headaches. The reason that I wanted a different type of life for myself was because I started to see around me how what was happening at the time impacted my child, and, you know, his behavior as a baby, you know, working full time and having to come home and take care of him, and then him not seeing me and him changing, and then me being out every night with my friends because I wanted my freedom. I didn't understand what it meant to be a mother at the time. And it was just because I never had anything to focus on as far as my faith. And then when I realized what impact I was making on my own child by my alcohol and drug use, I realized I needed to make a change and be a better person, but at the same time too, be able to do something that impacted his life so that he could grow up and be a better person as well.
Kirsten wasn't sure how to make that change, but just that a change had to be made. She was soon introduced to the Church of Christ.
It was kind of eye-opening, enlightening. It gave me a moment of clarity. It brought some things into my life that I never thought I could hear of. To know that the church was prophesied in the Bible, that it actually says that the Church of Christ is the true church and that you'll be saved. Being a member of the true church meant a lot to me. It brought me such hope and such a feeling of fullness that I never had before.
But that hope did not come without some sacrifice. A single working mother, Kirsten found it hard making ends meet and making time to continue Bible studies. But she did continue. And at the end of her struggles came a sweet reward.
I was baptized on February 1st, 1997. And then as soon as I was immersed in the water, and as soon as I came up, everything changed. A sense of calmness came around me, and ever since then I have the same feeling. And God's always been there for me. As what I've seen in the Iglesia Ni Cristo, the families are very tight-knit. What I've seen in the church, I've never seen anywhere in my life. I've never seen the love and the compassion that's given by the brethren. They give each other hope and encouragement.
The brethren helped guide Kirsten in raising her own son to be a loving servant of God.
It takes a village to raise a child, and I really believe if it wasn't for the brethren in my locale, I don't know what I would do. There's been so many times that I've, even had times where I had to talk to him and I wasn't able to, and not having family to go to and be able to pray and then ask the brethren around me for help has made such a difference in my life. It's made a huge impact on his, I'm sure. And I don't think he'll ever forget it.
What Kirsten will never forget is where she started and how far she's come.
What I see now in life is different than what I saw 10 years ago. I see myself exceeding at everything I do. They put a roadblock up, I run right through it. I don't see anything stopping me. I see that one thing I notice about myself, God's given me something that nothing else has given me in this life. And that's the guts to continue, to keep going. Do what you expected to be done in your life. Do what you want to do. But do it with God. I even had people tell me, man, I can see that there's this huge change in you. The way you act, you know, your whole attitude is different. You know, and I have my coworkers even now tell me, where are you going? Are you going to church again? You go to church all the time. You need to rest. No, I don't rest for God. I never rest, but then I don't get tired because of it. He's always taking care of me.
There's no denying the love that Kirsten has for her child. Lloyd Jim Divini can certainly relate. As a matter of fact, it's his own child that continues to serve as a reminder that miracles do happen. Here's that story.
Meet Lloyd Jim Divini. Today his life is filled with faith. And after being in the Navy for 30 years, one would think he'd always been disciplined. But Jim could find neither faith nor discipline before he joined the church that changed his life.
Prior to being a member of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, I was a drunkard. But being able to hear the worship service, hear the Bible studies, learn how to live my life, but most importantly, how to ask Jesus for help, how to ask Jesus to intercede on my behalf, I sobered up. And since I asked for that help and received that help, I have not had a drop to drink. I don't need it, and it's against God's commandments. I don't touch it.
Brother Jim received that life-changing faith through the missionary efforts of Brother Joel Del Rosario, who came to his home and conducted a Bible study.
Brother Joel Del Rosario and the two deacons continued to discuss with me the Iglesia Ni Cristo. And I was shocked again through the Bible studies when Brother Joel continuously read from the Bible, explained from the Bible, answered my questions from the Bible. That never happened in the Catholic Church that I could recall. And here I was, an altar boy, a soldier of Christ, and they're speaking to me this way. As I left the Catholic Church, I bounced from church to religion to church, thinking that I belonged somewhere, but not knowing where I belonged. As I continued the Bible studies with Brother Joel, I began to think, this is where I belong.
But before Brother Jim could join the Church of Christ, he had to overcome one of the greatest trials he'd ever faced. One that no battleship or basic training could prepare him for. This trial required something bigger than life. It required faith.
Before I was able to be baptized, my wife gave birth to our first child, a son. However, at the hospital in San Diego, they wanted to give my son last rites. My wife, as you could understand, was extremely upset. So I raced to the hospital, where they were trying to convince her and me to give my son last rites. But I said, no, wait, I have someone I want to call. So I called Brother Joel and explained to him my problem. He arrived. With my wife and I, we prayed and we cried. My son is here with us in San Antonio today. He's 29 years old and you wouldn't think that he was sick a day in his life.
Brother Jim has watched his son grow to adulthood, but there isn't a day where he forgets how precious a gift that's been. When he thinks of that crucial day almost 3 decades ago, it's not the pain of those crucial moments that he remembers, but the joy of having his miraculous request granted. Over bumps in the road or shady paths, Brother Jim still travels fully sure that no matter what he faces it with God.
In case you haven't noticed, our previous stories were about people who eventually found the right course. For our final story, we'll meet a man who desperately needed God to survive. Here's that story.
I grew up in a regular family, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant background. Both parents attended church, brothers and sisters, very close, from a small town. And life was pretty good until my early teens. My early teens is when I started to experiment with drugs. It was like a vicious cycle. These drugs are what's making you feel bad, yet you need them to feel good. So it's like, it's a catch-22. I was basically living in a homeless shelter in a city where I knew so many people. So I was untrustworthy. My family didn't trust me. I decided to stop using drugs 100 times, and it would never worked. It came from a counselor. She called me into her office, and she was very concerned. She said she'd counseled thousands of addicts her entire life, and and there's 5 that I remind her of. There's 5 addicts that I reminded her of, and she said 3 of those are dead, and one of them was my husband. She says, if you don't find God, you'll die when you leave here. And I said, how do I find God? And she said, go to a church. I said, how do I find a church? She says, look in the yellow pages. And I did. I looked in the yellow pages. When I got there was a lot of singing and dancing, drum kits, guitars and basses, and they did a lot of faith healing, and I didn't like it. And what I saw there, I didn't feel in any way whatsoever was going to help me learn how to live well. I'd just been to this place where people were rolling around on the ground, and I didn't like it, and so I just started talking to them, and they told me, they said, well, we just came from church. And I said, what church is that? And they said, the Church of Christ. And I said, oh, well, so I started talking to them, and she invited me to come that was a Sunday, she invited me to come the next Thursday. And my first question was, do you have to roll around on the ground there? And she said, no, we don't roll around on the ground.
And those who walk in a good way, what again will they...
After that worship service, I had my first Bible study, and that's when the message clicked. I'd always go to these 12-center programs, and they would talk about, turning your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand Him. Well, I didn't understand what He was. The only thing I knew about God was that He was there and He didn't like me. So how could I turn my will and my life over to something I didn't know? And it wasn't until I found the Church of Christ that my first worship service, when I did my first Bible study, I finally found out what He was, and what He wanted. That's what helped me. That's what helped me stop using drugs, was by turning my will and my life over to the care of a God that I did understand. It's all laid out in the Bible, what He wants, what He expects, and that's what I needed. I needed to understand Him before I could just turn my life over to Him. And that's what was different about the Church of Christ. I really finally got to understand what was expected of me. My motivation when I joined the church was just to stop using drugs. It wasn't salvation. That came after. That came after the Bible studies. So for God just to remove that completely from me is blessing upon is unbelievable blessing. When I went in the water and came out, it was like, it's just a completely different world to me. It's scary to say, but I can't even see that old person anymore. It's like he really did die that day when I was, when I was baptized. I have a meaningful life today, and I can look myself in the mirror and be proud of the person I see today. And that all comes down to the blessings from God, the Church of Christ, and it's my membership in the church is what I hold most dear. out of anything in this world, I hold my membership in this church as number one.
You've just witnessed the stories of people whose lives may have never crossed paths, but are now linked together simply by their stories of faith. I'm Cynthia Van Schemelhout. Thanks for watching. See you next time.